You're watching The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are The Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building, Tosha with an O Mills. Good morning.
Good morning.
I never seen
Good
Tosha
morning.
with an O.
Well, Joshua, right?
Okay.
So it's Tosha.
I almost called you Tosha, but you know.
Oh my God. Good morning. How are you?
Good
morning.
morning,
Welcome.
Charlamagne. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm blessed, black, and highly favored. Could you tell the people, like, you know, who you are?
Well, she's an author. She has a book, Mama.
You aren't Tasha. Can Tasha speak for herself?
Introduce her in the correct
Jesus
way.
Christ.
You know what? I'll do the
Introduce her in
introduction.
the correct
Why
way.
can't she introduce herself?
Well, I'm going to just preface this by saying the reason why we even got in contact with each other was because when Jason Mitchell was up here from The Shy, and
Yes.
who played Eazy-E, you were his talent agent.
Yes, I developed Jason's career.
Mm-hmm. And he said, listen, I really want you to talk to Tasha. He mentions you in the interview.
Yes.
And he said she has a book out, and it's an incredible story that she wants to share. So that's how we got here. Now you can explain, Tasha, who you are.
I am an author. I'm also a talent agent. I've been in business for over 19 years. A boutique agency in New Orleans, and I represent mostly African-American talent. And my talent can be seen all over America in so many different television shows and commercials. And I'm also an author of a new book called Mama, I Should Have Listened that's been touching people around the world.
Mm-hmm. And who else have you represented other than Jason that we may know?
Oh God, Donna Duplanche. She was on the Breakfast Club. She was in Benjamin Button. David Kinsey, Lloyd Watts. It's so many.
Mm-hmm.
It's so many.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it's interesting, because a lot of times people don't know what's going on in your own personal life.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a story about, it's called Mama, I Should Have Listened. It's your memoir, an inspirational memoir.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about your son, Blake.
Yes.
AKA BJ. He got sentenced to 40 years
40 years.
for aggravated robbery when he was only 17 years old. So explain.
Wait, what's aggravated robbery?
Aggravated robbery is, they said, with a deadly weapon, but no weapon was found. And it was 2 counts in Texas. My son was an actor. He was a writer. He was a rapper. He actually participated in Lil Wayne's first video. Everything. And he also did off-Broadway plays in New York City. Mm-hmm. So he was a musical genius, and he just took a different route in search. He wanted to go and live with a father who he barely knew, who would come into his life periodically. And he just kind of took a wrong turn. And because of that, he received 40 years in prison.
That seems kind of heavy. That's a heavy sentence for robbery, right?
Oh, my God, yes, it's a very heavy sentence. But, you know, like I tell people when I'm speaking all over the world, I just got back from Sacramento speaking to lifers and at a huge prison. And we talked about that. I talk about how we are designed, Black people, they design it to be that way. You know, there's field niggers and there's house niggers. And I hate to use that word.
I love it.
But if you go back in history, they are designed to break us apart. They're designed, house niggers, they thought that house niggers were better than field niggers. And so when I was there, I inspired them to do better. They need to band together. And so many people were touched in that prison that day. It changed my life.
Who did he rob? What was the situation? Because, I mean, that seems like a long time. And was it an older white person?
Yeah, was it violent? Like, what was it?
No. He had a BB gun.
No.
Yes. No gun was recovered. Mm-hmm. And he took the charge for 3 other people. And they basically, they made him take a plea. Mm-hmm. And, well, not plea. They basically said, you know, you're going to take these charges or you will receive life in prison.
Oh, because he wouldn't tell, they wanted to make an example.
Exactly. They made an example. And you have to understand, this was right after Katrina, when so many people moved to the neighboring state of Houston. So you had so many of us there. And they wanted to make an example out of us.
So he was 17 years old. Did he have, like, any, like, previous juvenile offenses or something?
He had a previous juvenile offense of selling marijuana.
Mm-hmm. That shouldn't lead to 40 years.
Yes, and they couldn't even take that into account, Charlamagne. By education, I'm a paralegal at a law firm. So I knew what they could do, but at that point, I really couldn't afford what the lawyers were asking. They all wanted like $25,000.
That's what I was. My next question is like, did he have a real lawyer or a public defender?
He had a public defender.
And the public defender
goodness.
was under the impression that he would just get probation.
Yes, you read the book, Angela, and he assured me that we're going to go for probation. And so when that judge hit the gravel and said 40 years, my heart dropped. Because that's a long time. This is my baby, I have 4 sons, but this was my oldest. And, this book is making people aware of some of the mistakes that we can make and that no one is immune from this. Because, you have so many parents, oh, not my child. And it can be your child. I was a professional mom. I worked every day. But did I make some mistakes along the way? Yes, I did. Maybe I was out making some things happen and I should have been looking at what was happening.
Could you appeal?
Well, again, a public defender appealed.
Oh, my goodness.
And it went another way, but that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book to make people aware, and I'm just not fighting and on the front line for my child. I'm on the front line for so many other kids.
Is there any other chances now that the book seems like it's doing well and it looks like you're doing? Is there any other chances?
Well, that's why I'm putting in the work, DJ MV. The book sales are going towards public legal defense. Again, not just for my child, because there are children all over this nation that are going through the exact same thing, and parents are hurting. I get letters from parents all over this world, and they're like, my kid is on drugs. What should I do? I've spent $20,000 and $30,000 on attorneys, and I just don't know what to do. And that's where I come in. I spend my own money flying, like I said, I just came from Sacramento because they read my book and they were so inspired by it. I'll be in Philadelphia next month. They're flying me in to speak to some public officials. I'm out here trying to change laws. So with that, I'm praying and hoping that somebody will hear this story and jump in and say, this is what I need to do.
How long has he been in so far?
He's been in 10 years.
10 years, man. Stories like this always touch me because I think about when I was 16, 17, and the charges I was getting, assault and battery with intent to kill, point and present a firearm. Like, I could have easily been under the jail for 40 years.
We are all a day away from prison. All the way. We're all of us are a day away from prison. And that's what I spoke about on Friday to those prisoners in Sacramento. I spoke to, there probably were they had 4 Latinos in there, 1 Asian, and the rest were Black. And they were all touched by the story. And I believe when I, left out of there, lives were changed.
Did you write the president?
And that's what I'm going to do.
Did you write the president?
Well, the president can only, you have to write the governor of Texas, which is Greg Abbott. And I did write him. The president can only commune sentences, federal sentences, not state.
It seems like this is the one that Obama would have pardoned on his way out, because, 40 years for a robbery, nobody died. Yeah, this is the one you pardoned.
Let me ask you this. Blake also says since he's been in jail, and there were other people that he is not snitching on, and he says none of them have written to him, and he hasn't had any communication.
Angela Yee, if my husband and myself and my 3 other kids don't see him, nobody sees him. Out of sight, out of mind. He was living with his dad in Texas. It's been 10 years, no visit. So I'm the only one, and it hurts. I mean, this is a hard one for me, but I'm trying to change lives. I consider myself a change agent. And so, just with, Jason really inspired me writing this book, because I remember when we were on Walking the Red Carpet for Straight Outta Compton, he said to me, thank you, I wouldn't be here. Because when he walked in my office, saying he wanted to act, Jason was a total mess. Yeah, and he'll tell you that. Yeah. He was a total mess. And, he was all tatted up. He got into acting classes with Jacqueline Fleming, who I also managed, her and Mickey Val. And Jacqueline was a celebrity at that time. And she started a school. She lived, came to New Orleans, and we met, and I started representing her. And she said, I want you come in to a showcase. And it was me and I think 3 other white agents. Nobody would touch him. It was the image. And I said, there's something special about him. And I mean, the first film was Contraband. He booked it. and each film after that, Jason was booking. And so I'm glad I was able to help him change his life and find who he really was.
Right. And he was very adamant. He was like, you need to talk to Tosha. And I want to make sure that she can get on the Breakfast Club to be able to tell her story about her son.
Yes. He's been very instrumental.
Why do you think the streets have such a pull over our youth? Because you seem like a very stable woman and you keep people on the right path. So why did your son veer off?
Charlamagne, fathers, and I'm going to say this, fathers are very important. I had my son when I was 17. There were some mistakes that I made. And I write about that in a book. I write about blended family environments. And when you are in a blended family environment and you don't feel sometimes that you are liked or that you are favored in that family because there's a step parent, sometimes that will make a child go and look for his father. So many parents read my book, and after they did, they say, oh my God, I'm going through a divorce because I am losing my children in the hands of their step parent. And that's hard. So Blake write me a letter in the book, and it was the hardest letter for me to ever hear from my son. He said that we let each other down. Wow. I allowed a man to come in my life and disrupt our relationship as he allowed his father to come between us like two pieces of meat, between slices of bread. That was the hardest thing for me to hear. I stopped writing. But that was his truth, and it liberated him. And in hindsight, he was right. So I wound up getting a divorce, and after getting divorced, I married a wonderful guy who's from New Jersey, and I said that if we all could not be on the same plane, it would not come off of the runway. And I meant that. So I talk to parents, in the book, and I tell them, you have to change the narrative of a lot of things that you're doing, because a lot of kids are falling prey in the hands of step parents.
Yeah, you said that was very hard for you in particular because you had to realize he wasn't blaming you for the situation. He was just being honest and speaking from his heart about what actually happened in his life. And you had to realize that you had to take some responsibility.
Absolutely. And I had him at 17. So there are some mistakes I've made. I mean, if I would have been responsible with my body at that age, to someone who I thought loved me, but who knows about love at 17 years old. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be here. And in the book, I also talk about generational curse.
Right.
Blake also has a little brother who's serving time in prison.
Yikes.
And he's serving time in prison on, I think, an attempted murder charge, 15 years in Louisiana. And same father. And their father, Blake's father, was in jail. So you kind of have to look at the root and get to the root of the problem. So when I'm speaking, I talk about that. And one of the things that touched one of the guys in prison in Sacramento, he said, when I read that, I couldn't do anything but he said, I laid down and I cried because my father went to prison when I was 1. I went to prison when my daughter was 1, and my daughter is 25 and just paroled out of prison. And that touched me. That touched me to a core that I can't even explain.
I wonder, how do you break that cycle, though? Because, I mean, I would feel like mistakes would be enough, but it never is.
Awareness.
Yeah.
And he asked me, he said, Mrs. Mills, how do I break that cycle? I said, you just broke it because you're aware. He said, I want to come out and I want to get on movies and I want to do what you're doing. I want to speak to the youth and go out and make people aware. And I said, you just answer that question yourself. You're made aware. When you're aware of something, you just don't do it.
Your son Blake also talks about peer pressure and just wanting to fit in with his friends as part of the reason why he was doing some of the things that he was doing.
I agree with that. That's all it was for me.
Yeah.
My mom was a Jehovah's Witness, an English teacher. My father was in the street, but he was one of those do as I say, not as I do type people.
Yes.
So I didn't have to get involved in none of that stuff. But that allure of the street, that peer pressure, just wanting to fit in.
Yeah.
And the fact that his father wasn't there, I'm sure there was nobody to run to but the streets.
Right. Well, yeah. And he just, he really didn't want to listen. Let me say this. After Katrina, we moved up here for a year, right? I was offered several talent agent jobs up here, but they wanted me all to close my agency, and I just didn't want to do that, thank God. My son went to St. Benedict's, and he played basketball for St. Benedict's.
In New Jersey?
Yes, yes. And my son Christopher, he lives here as well. He's a fashion photographer in New York City, graduated from FIT. And I said that because they all were on the right path. And when I speak about generational curse, I mean, I have a son who graduated, went to Tulane University. Didn't graduate, but he's a graphic designer. Christopher's 22. He, graduated from FIT. And I have a son who is number 4 in the nation playing Madden. EA Madden Sports. He traveled around the country
playing
Madden.
doing that, by the way.
Yes, he's 20 years old. I thought he was crazy while he was always standing in the room. But all my kids are creative. They all have that creative spark from me. I'm not going to take anything away from my ex-husband. Let me just put that out there. He was a very good father. But again, sometimes you just don't realize some of the things that you're doing when it's not your child.
You know, when your son that was in jail was acting up, it does become a point where parents are like, whatever, you're going to learn the hard way.
And I did that.
Yeah. And you kind of got to let that happen, right? But you hate that it had to be this harsh, but...
That's why you don't want that to happen.
But after a while, if your kid's not listening and you keep getting in trouble, you're like, all right, you're going to learn.
I read your story, Charlamagne.
Yeah.
And a part of that was your case, right?
Absolutely.
With your mom and dad.
Absolutely.
And he kept getting in trouble, and I said, my hands are tied. And then he said, I'm going to live with my dad. And I said, Blake, I'm leaving you in God's hands. And he said, that's what you do. 6 months later, the dad's calling me saying, Blake has a $250,000 bond. And I'm like, I'm sorry, there's nothing that I can do. And then Blake calls me and said, Mom, I need a lawyer. You need to help me. And I said, Texas is out of my jurisdiction. And at that point, there was no more that I could do at that point.
I agree, though. So you can't really beat yourself up about it.
I don't. But there were some mistakes that were made, Charlamagne. And I'm not going to take that away. There were some mistakes that were made.
Now, let me ask you a question. If you could bring it back, would you have fought for a lawyer and fought for a lawyer?
I would have.
You would have?
I would have.
The reason I say that is I think most parents would say that, well, you were on your own because you didn't think it was that serious.
Right.
But then some of them times, then you don't realize, and it's always too late,
You had no idea that was going to be 40 years for
hell no.
Period.
Hell no, I did not. And, I'm going to go back to my first visit. My first visit at a prison, a penitentiary in Texas, they were shining the warden's shoes. It was like slavery. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. This crap is ridiculous. And when I talked to the prisoners about that on Friday, they were like, are you serious? Because they were in a book club. They had a book club. And one of the Caucasian prison officials said, yeah, we do this. And one of the inmates said, well, why you didn't do this while we were in the community? Why does it take for us to come to the jail, to prison, to the penitentiary for you to put a book club here? Why can't you do that now? And the prison official really couldn't understand, but I understood exactly what he said, because just the week before, I'm seeing black people shining the warden's shoes. Like, really? That's so heartbreaking. And when I leave that prison, I cry each and every time because it's so hard for me as a mother. Let me tell you, my son would have been Dre in that movie. He would have been Dre in that movie.
Right.
So, Jason kind of just took, I look at Jason as a son almost, and he kind of helped with that.
And then there's no real reform in prison anymore. It's not like they're getting the education that they can use when they get in the outside world. It's not like they're learning a trade. It's not like they're even letting them get physically strong anymore.
No, they're not. They institutionalize to dehumanize. And so I try to keep my son on the right track. He's always in solitary confinement. And I said, Blake, why are you here? And he said, Mom, I'm here to stay out of trouble. That's why I'm here. I'm in a better mental state when I'm in solitary confinement because I don't have to deal with the fights. I don't have to deal with the Mexican gangs. I am alone. And sometimes that is hard. He said, I cried for the first time I saw a white guy, hang himself. His eyes rolled to the back of his head. He said, and I laid on that mattress, which was as thin as a 50-page magazine, and I looked at that wall, and he said, what have I done? What have I done?
Now, well, how is there any way to try to help? Because I mean, I'm sure you're fighting to get him out. Is there any way that people can do? Can they write somebody? Can they send letters? What can we do as a community to help if possible?
DJ MV, you can buy the books, because the books, again, they are not helping just my son. I'm fighting for everybody on the front line. I'm the drum major, but I'm in need of some band leaders, because this can be your child next week. Right. Again, no one's immune.
Right, absolutely.
But we have to put in the work. And it's a lot of work on one person. I'm taking my own money traveling, exhausting my funds. But I know that I have to put in the work, because in order for my son to be helped, people need to hear.
How did your son feel about you when he called and he said, he needed a bail and he needed a lawyer, and you said it's in God's hands now? How did he feel about you, his mom?
He was really hurt, but he understood. He understood. And in the book, he talked about that. He says, Mom, it's all about intention. Everything is about intention. And I know your intentions were right. So let's not get this wrong. But what you're doing is great. And I want you to put in the work. But don't make it seem like I was an angel, because I wasn't.
Yeah, because there comes a point in time where he even has to realize, like, life is a matter of choice, not chance. He made choices.
And I think even as a juvenile, he was getting in trouble, but he was never having real consequences from that. The judge was letting a lot of things slide, and you were helping him out every single time something happened. What would you tell moms if they have a son or a daughter right now that's constantly having to be in front of the judge in juvenile before things escalate and they turn 17?
I would say to any parent, let them hit rock bottom when they're young. Let them hit rock bottom. My son started selling drugs. I was unaware. I didn't hear this until his dad told me that he was caught with weed. I never knew this, all right, until his dad told me maybe a year later. Had I known, I could have put him in a rehab or something like that. Our kids are doing things because they're under the influence. The drugs are coming into our community. They start selling them, and then they start using them. Marijuana dipped with PCP and all this other stuff. It's messing their minds up.
Right.
And I tell parents, you have to be aware. You have to be aware. You have to change the trajectory, because if you don't, your child is going to be where my son is. And I'm trying to stop that. I'm trying to stop that.
Now, when you say aware, were you aware as in checking his bag, checking his room, that aware, or what do you mean aware?
Yes.
I mean, my dad did that to me. Like, my dad is a retired police officer, so he was the one to follow me to school at times. He was always there. And I do that with my kids now, too. Just pop up on their ass just to make sure they're doing the right thing. And I'll continue to do that until they...
DJ and my cousin Donnie, her daughter is a junior in high school, and on her phone there's a tracker.
Oh, he has it on his kid's phone.
He has a tracker, right?
Never mind.
Stop, my kids listen.
And she knows the intersection of where her kids are at all times.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so you have to. Right now, parents are really scared of their children. They're really scared of their children. They're fighting their parents. Some of the things I see. I was in the grocery store, and this little boy was talking to his mom really, really crazy. And before I know it, he was in my hands. And he started crying, and I just kind of... Yes.
Somebody else's kids?
Yes, because I got so upset. And I said, you are not going to talk to your mom like that. And he looked at me, and he started crying, and then I just held him.
And what did mama do?
And she looked at me like, what are you doing? Right? But she appreciated it.
Okay.
And he was about 15, and he said, Mom, it's okay. It's okay.
You're right. And then we live in this system where they get upset at us for disciplining our children.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
The kids know that.
I can't discipline my child.
They do know that.
The kids know that.
I can't beat my child.
You can't.
I can't punish my child.
But the kids know that. The kids will go to school and say, my mama hit me, knowing that they'll get in trouble. Like, the kids know that back in the day.
Because guess what? If the parents don't do it, the system will.
Right?
Oh, yes. One I write in my author's note, which is the last chapter in my book about Milan Areola. Because I want to make this known. I'm just not fighting for kids that are in prison. I'm fighting so they will not get to prison, right? I want to start creative programs in our communities. And we have creative writing, we have acting. They can come there and do their homework because they just really need somewhere to go. But Milan Areola was a little girl that was killed, honor student. She was killed in New Orleans I think when she was maybe 20 years old. She was riding in the car with her boyfriend. And her mom writes on Facebook, Amani Ruffin, her mom writes on Facebook every day how she misses her daughter, her best friend. And I reached out to her because her story touched me so much. And she said to me, she said, I just really miss my daughter. She said, but I understand. And she's going to write a book about the breakout of families. The breakdown of families. And what are happening in the families. So I don't want people to think that I'm just fighting because my son is in jail. Oh no, he did it. I'm fighting for injustice of time.
Right.
That's what I'm fighting for.
Yeah, because 17 years old, man, you can't throw a 17-year-old away for 40 years.
Especially when he was under the influence.
Yeah.
Right? He didn't know exactly what he was doing, but again, he did it.
Right.
So I'm not fighting for right or wrong. I'm fighting for injustice of time.
Do you hate public defenders?
Oh, I hate him. When you read the book Charlemagne,
and you see what the
oh
public
my
defender,
God, what did he say, Angeline?
First of all, she couldn't even get him on the phone at first, and then she finally sends him an email, and he responds and just blame it on me. Get another public defender. It's out of my hands.
Public defenders are not trying to help you at all.
Right.
They work for the freaking system.
They're trying to get you to plea out.
Yeah.
My dad
they
used to
want you
always
to get
say-
that
And
free
he also said that if she would have tried to take this to trial, he feels like it would have been worse for him in front of a jury.
Yes.
My pops used to always say that the cops are never your friends if you ever get pulled over
Isn't
or if
your
anything
dad
happens.
a cop?
My dad.
Okay.
My dad's my father though. At the end of the day, he used to say that the cops are not your friend and you never deal with a defender,
Public defender, ever.
never in your life. He says if you got to work, bust your ass to pay somebody that will put some time and effort into your case, they'll do way more time than a public defender.
And that's crazy because, I mean, I think about my situation. Just my father hadn't paid for me to have a lawyer. There's no telling where I'd have been.
Right.
Well, Mama, I Should Have Listened, A Voice of Pain and Power is the book. So if you want to support for Tosha Mills, make sure you pick this book up.
Thank you, Mama.
Thank you.
Her son also has some contributions in the book as well, Blake. They have some. It's good to get to hear his side of the story.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You have
And
a
you-
website and all that?
Yes, my website is www.tosha.mills.com. I'm on Instagram at Mama I Knew Better, and I'm also on Facebook at Tosha Smith Mills.
Okay, well, we appreciate you for joining us.
Thank you for
and
having
telling
me.
us your story.
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you
sure
so
many
much.
people have issues and so many people can relate to this.
Absolutely.
And appreciate you fighting this fight.
Thank you so much, guys.
All right, it's Tosha Mills. It's The Breakfast Club. Good morning.